It was supposed to be a simple favor. I hadn't planned on going out that day, especially not with someone I barely knew. But my husband had called last minute. Something about a meeting running late. And could I please let Daniel, his colleague, drop me off on his way home? He was insistent, said Daniel was trustworthy, and honestly I didn't want to make a fuss, so I agreed. Daniel pulled up in a charcoal gray Mustang, all polished steel and deep hum. He stepped out, smiled, too charming maybe. Maybe in the door for me like it was 1950. I was already regretting the dress I wore. Low neckline, thigh-high slit, more daring than I intended for a grocery run. But something about the way his eyes lingered told me it wasn't the dress that made the air shift. It was me. I got in. We made polite conversation at first. I laughed at something he said, maybe too loudly. Maybe I liked how his voice wrapped around the silence of the drive. He wasn't like my husband. Daniel watched me when I spoke. Really watched. Then we hit the stoplight at Clover and Fifth. We were alone on the road. The light turned red and Daniel eased the car to a stop. That's when it happened. Every radio station fuzzed out at once. Static, shrill, like nails dragged over glass. Then silence. Total, unnatural silence. Daniel turned to me slowly. Do you feel that? I nodded before I even knew what I was agreeing to. The air inside the car was thick as if something unseen had climbed inside with us. I could feel it between us. Heat, pressure, and something darker, something old. Then the windshield fogged over fast and white, despite the dry California heat. A handprint appeared on the inside. Inside, followed by another. Small, childlike. The prints dragged down slowly, like they were being pulled away. I couldn't speak. My throat was clenched shut. My heart pounding in places I didn't know had veins. Daniel didn't look scared. He looked expectant. Like he'd seen this before. He leaned in close, so close I could smell the faint trace. And in that moment, my blood ran cold. Not because of what he said, but because I realized something. Daniel was right, and I had plenty to hide. From that stoplight onward, nothing felt normal. The world kept moving. Cars, shops, people. But I wasn't in the same place I'd been 10 minutes earlier. It was like reality had shifted, just a hair, but enough to make everything feel slightly wrong. The shadows too long. The eyes of strangers lingering too long. The street signs spelling things they shouldn't. I thought I could forget it, pretend it didn't happen. But the handprints, those never left. They started appearing on mirrors, on windows, even on the inside of my shower door. Always child-sized, always dragging down like something was trying to crawl out. And Daniel, he kept showing up. Uninvited, unbothered, knowing every time he did I wanted to run. But a bigger part of me, a darker buried part, wanted to let him in. Because the closer he got, the closer I came to remembering something I think I made myself forget. Something about the child. Something about the deal I made, and what I owed. The first time I lost her, it was raining. Not the soft kind of rain that makes everything smell like memory, but a violent, unrelenting downpour that soaked through every layer of me. I stood there, trembling under the weight of a broken umbrella, watching the paramedics cover her with that plastic sheet. Light blue, too thin to matter. My baby girl, 3 years old, laughed like summer, slept with her arms wrapped around a stuffed elephant she called Mr. Flops, gone just like that. A drunk driver, a red light, a second too late. People say grief comes in waves. That's a lie. Grief is a tide that never recedes. You just learn how to drown without making a sound. I stopped laughing, stopped caring. I moved through my days like I was dragging someone else's body behind me. My husband tried at first. Flowers, counseling, religion. I didn't need a savior. I needed a time machine. And when I couldn't find that, I started needing something else. Or maybe someone else. Daniel entered quietly into my life like a shadow slipping under a locked door. He was my husband's colleague, a man I'd met a dozen times before but never really seen. Not until that day he offered to drive me home from the memorial service at St. Mary's. My husband had forgotten, said he was tied up. Again, Daniel didn't speak much, just drove. But there was something in the way his hands gripped the wheel, how he glanced at me, not with pity, but with understanding, recognition, like he'd lost something too. "Are you okay?" he finally asked, when we were stopped at a red light under a flickering street lamp. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned and looked at him fully. And for the first time since I buried my daughter, I felt something. A flicker, a heat, guilt, yes, but also hunger. He must have seen it because he said softly, "You don't have to pretend anymore." I don't remember leaning in, but I remember the way his lips felt. Warm, searching, unfamiliar in a way that made me ache. And just as quickly as it began, the light turned green. But neither of us moved. Because in the rearview mirror, we both saw it at once. A tiny handprint fogged onto the back window. Inside the car, I gasped, turned around. Nothing. The seat was empty. When I looked back at Daniel, he was already staring at me, pale, frozen. "You've seen her too," he whispered. That was the moment I knew. Losing my daughter had changed everything. But something else, something not from this world, had changed me. And it wasn't finished yet. I wasn't always like this. There was a time when I wore bright colors, baked on Sundays, and believed in things like luck and good timing. We lived in a modest house just outside Portland. 2 bedrooms, a small backyard with a rusted swing set, and chipped yellow paint on the shutters that I kept meaning to fix. We weren't rich, but we were okay. Middle class, holding it together with careful budgeting, coupons, and takeout only on Fridays. My husband, Drew, worked in insurance. Long hours, quiet voice, decent man. We weren't passionate anymore. Maybe we never were. But he made me tea when I was sick and always paid the bills on time. That counted for something. I had dreams once. I studied fine arts in college. Wanted to open a little studio, teach painting, maybe sell prints on Etsy. But after Lily was born, those dreams dried up like old brushes left in water. She needed me more. And that was okay. She was my life. After the accident, everything cracked. Drew retreated into work. I could tell he blamed me, even if he never said it out loud. I had been the one watching her. I had turned my back for just a moment to answer a call. That was all it took. One ring, one breath. People stopped calling after a while, friends from the mom groups, the neighbor with the twin boys. Even my own sister texted less and less. Grief makes you uncomfortable to be around. It clings to your words, makes small talk feel like a sin. I stopped painting. I stopped answering the door. Some days I didn't even shower. I'd lie in bed until the sun set, scrolling through old videos of Lily on my phone, watching the way she twirled when she danced or mispronounced words in that adorable, frustrating way toddlers do. I played those videos on loop until the battery died, and then I just stared at the dark screen. I took freelance editing jobs online, just enough to keep the lights on and make it seem like I was still trying. Most nights, dinner was microwavable. Drew didn't complain. He just grew quieter, emptier. There was a silence in our home so thick you could taste it. Bitter, metallic, like blood in your mouth after a tooth is pulled. I survived one day at a time. Meds helped, though I hated them. They numbed everything. I missed feeling anything, even pain. That's what made Daniel so dangerous. So dangerous. He made me feel. When he looked at me, he didn't see the broken mother or the ghost of someone who used to laugh. He saw something deeper, darker, something alive beneath all the numbness. And I couldn't help but lean toward that heat, even if I knew it would burn me. It started slowly, so subtly I thought I was imagining it. The first night after Daniel kissed me, I dreamed of warm hands wrapping around my waist from behind, pulling me into a body that felt both unfamiliar and necessary. The scent of cedarwood and fire lingered in the air, and a voice whispered something in my ear. I couldn't make out the words, but it wasn't my husband's voice. When I woke, my skin was flushed, damp, the sheets tangled around me like they'd been part of something intimate. My husband was still asleep beside me, unmoving, his side of the bed cold. I brushed it off. Stress, guilt, maybe a side effect of the new pills. But the dreams kept coming. Each night they grew more vivid. A candlelit room I didn't recognize. Long corridors. Crimson velvet curtains swaying despite no breeze. And always the same sensation. Someone behind me, watching, touching, wanting. It wasn't a nightmare. It was romantic, in a way that felt sacred and forbidden. One evening while brushing my hair in front of the mirror, I swore I saw movement behind me. Just a flicker. A shadow where there shouldn't have been one. When I turned, nothing, but the air was different, warmer, charged. Sometimes when I stood in the kitchen doing dishes, I'd hear a soft hum behind me. A low melody, like someone singing a lullaby just beneath their breath. It always stopped the moment I turned my head. And then there were the roses. On the third morning, I found a single blood-red rose on my nightstand. No note, no explanation. Drew didn't say anything, didn't even seem to notice it, but the petals were fresh, dew-kissed, as if plucked from a garden that didn't exist. I should have been frightened, but I wasn't. Instead, a strange sense of being wanted took root in me, deep and impossible to explain. I felt it most when I was alone, a tingle across my skin, a whisper I couldn't quite catch but somehow understood. I started locking the bathroom door even when no one else was home. I lit candles for no reason, stood in front of the mirror a little longer than necessary as if expecting someone to meet my gaze from the other side, and every now and then, just as I was drifting to sleep, I'd hear a breath beside me that wasn't mine, or my husband's. Not cold, not threatening. Just there, watching, waiting, wanting. Her name was Mara. We met at a grief support group I stopped attending after the third session, but she messaged me anyway. Said something like, "You looked like you were trying not to fall apart. I respect that. Let me know if you ever want to." I ignored her for weeks. Then one night after another rose appeared, this time on my pillow, I texted back 2 words. Coffee tomorrow. She showed up at the cafe wearing a faded leather jacket, no makeup, and a sarcastic smile that somehow felt safer than kindness. Mara didn't ask how I was doing. She just slid a black coffee across the table and said, "You look like you've seen something." I think that's why I didn't lie. Maybe it was the quiet way she listened. Maybe it was because I needed someone to believe me. I told her everything. About the dreams, the roses, the handprints, the humming. Even Daniel. Especially Daniel. She didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head, watching me carefully. "Sounds like something's trying to get your attention," she said, then added, "Or maybe trying to get you." I laughed nervously. "You think I'm losing it?" "No," she said. "I think you already lost something. And now something else is moving into that space." From then on, Mara became my tether. We started meeting once a week. Then more. She'd show up unannounced with Thai takeout, sit on the floor of my living room, and talk about everything except our tragedies. She'd tell stories about her childhood in Arizona, her bisexual ex-girlfriend who stole her books, the time she almost moved to France on a dare. She had a way of making the present feel lighter, and she noticed things I didn't. "The rose," she said one night, curled up on my couch, legs tucked under her. "It smells like firewood." "That's not normal, I know. Do you feel watched?" "Not by Daniel, by something else?" I nodded slowly. She reached out and touched my wrist, her fingers warm. "You're not crazy, Eliza, but something's shifting around you. Maybe it's grief, or maybe it's something deeper, something old." Our closeness wasn't sudden. It bloomed like a bruise, slowly darkening until it couldn't be ignored. The touches lasted longer. The silences between us grew heavier, charged. One night, when the lights flickered during a storm and the air in the room felt electric, I caught her staring at my lips. I didn't pull away. Neither did she. She kissed me softly. Not hungry like Daniel had. Gentle. Like she was asking permission before taking what she already knew was hers, and for a moment the world stilled. No whispers, no shadows, just Mara, safe, real. Afterward, she laid her head on my shoulder. "Whatever's happening," she whispered, "you don't have to face it alone." I wanted to believe that, but even as I held her, I could feel it watching from the corner of the room. The thing that had crawled into my dreams and touched me like a lover before I ever said yes. It didn't like sharing, and soon it would make that clear. The only person who hadn't vanished from my life after the accident was Harper. We met years ago in a community painting class, back when I still believed I could do something with my art. She was a graphic designer, sharp-tongued, always dressed like she walked out of a thrift store ad in a fashion magazine. We were opposites, but somehow we clicked. She was my maid of honor, Lily's unofficial godmother, the only person who still texted me without feeling sorry for me. She started stopping by once a week with takeout and sarcasm. "You're wasting away," she said one night, placing a brown paper bag of pad thai on the counter. "And don't even try to say it's the flu. I know grief weight loss when I see it." I shrugged, pulled my cardigan tighter. "I'm fine." "No, you're not," she said gently. "But I'm not leaving," and she didn't. She cleaned my dishes when I forgot. sat beside me during awkward silences. Sometimes, she just read aloud from whatever paperback she'd brought that week, her voice filling the empty corners of my house. She noticed the changes before I said a word. "You've been different," she said one night. "Not in a bad way, just off how? I don't know, distracted. Like your mind is somewhere else, somewhere dark." I almost told her then. About the dreams, the handprints, the feeling of not being alone even when the room was empty. But I was afraid. Afraid of what she'd think. Afraid of how much I wanted it all to be real. Instead, I said, "Do you believe in ghosts?" She raised an eyebrow. "You've been in this house too long," but she didn't laugh. Not really. Instead, she watched me with that same old Harper intensity, like she saw through the words I didn't say. One night after 2 glasses of wine and a too long silence, she touched my hand. "I miss her too, you know," she said, her voice cracking, "not like you do. But I love that little girl." I squeezed her fingers. "I know." Her thumb brushed over my knuckles, the touch lingered. We looked at each other, really looked. It wasn't just grief anymore, there was something underneath it. Something alive, trembling, and tender. The next time she stayed late, I offered her the guest bed, but she shook her head. "No," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to be alone tonight." So she stayed in my room. We didn't speak. We didn't touch. But she lay beside me, breathing soft and steady. And when I woke in the middle of the night, heart racing, sweat on my skin from another dream of that velvet-draped room and that presence behind me, Harper reached out and pulled me close. Her arms around me were real. Solid, grounding. But even safe in her warmth, I felt it again. A breath at my neck. A warmth not from her body. A presence that pulsed between us, watching with strange affection. Like it didn't mind sharing, like it knew. And it wasn't going anywhere. Harper started coming more often after that night. Sometimes she'd bring her laptop and work at the kitchen table while I read quietly across from her. Sometimes we cooked together. Other nights, we just listened to old records in silence, letting the music fill the places where words couldn't. One evening, while we sat together on the back porch under a sky that bled orange and indigo, she leaned her head on my shoulder. "You're changing," she said softly. "But it doesn't scare me." "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "You're blooming again, like a flower growing out of ash." "Gee, yeah. But there's something dark in it. Like something's feeding you from the roots." I didn't know how to answer that. Because I felt it too. Something had changed in me since Daniel kissed me. And it wasn't just guilt or longing. It was deeper. Something ancient stirring just under the surface, coiled like smoke. And I kissed her back. With all the grief and hunger and broken longing that had been locked inside me since Lily died. It was slow, gentle, real. But when I opened my eyes afterward, the candles on my dresser had flickered out. Every one of them. And in the mirror, for just one fleeting moment, I saw her, Lily, standing behind us, but not as she was. Pale, eyes dark, watching. The days blurred after that. Harper and I grew closer, entwined emotionally, physically, almost spiritually. She was my anchor, my warmth, the only light I trusted. But the dreams got worse. The handprints weren't just on glass anymore. They began appearing on my arms when I woke, faint but unmistakable, like a child had been reaching for me from the other side. I started hearing her voice. Lily's laugh echoing faintly in places she had never stood. A music box playing itself at night from the attic, even though I'd thrown it away months ago. Then, on the 7th night, I found a letter tucked beneath my pillow in a language I couldn't read, but I understood it. The Iltemate. That was the word that rang inside me. A curse. Or maybe a pact. A mother's grief so deep it tore open the veil between life and death, and something had stepped through. Something old, something seductive. Daniel returned. He showed up at my doorstep one morning, eyes sunken, lips cracked like he hadn't slept in days. "You've seen it now, haven't you?" he asked. He asked you now? I nodded. The Iltemate feeds on desire, on the things we bury. It gives you back what you want most, but only if you keep wanting, keep aching. I felt sick. Why me? Because you asked. That night, when you screamed into the rain, it heard you. And it answered. And it answered. Harper didn't believe him at first. Until she started seeing it too. Shadows curling along the walls. Her voice echoing a beat too late. Her own reflection smiling when she wasn't. But she stayed, even as I unraveled. Even as the thing inside me grew stronger. And then one night I gave in. I let it take me. In a dream. Or maybe it wasn't a dream. I stood barefoot in the velvet-draped room, wearing nothing but a nightgown stained with grief and longing. A figure stepped out of the dark, tall, regal, with no face. Only a mouth that whispered promises. Hands that burned like desire. It kissed me with the force of everything I had lost. And I let it, because for a moment I felt whole again. But the price was Lily. I saw her, trapped behind glass, reaching. The Iltemate had her. It hadn't taken her body, it had taken her spirit. That was the deal I had unknowingly made. My fantasy, my desire, my secret craving to feel alive again, had chained her soul. Now I have a choice. Let go of Harper, deny my longing, starve the curse, or surrender completely. Let it feed on every breath of romance, every taste of forbidden love between Harper and me, until I'm nothing but a vessel for the Iltimate's hunger. And Lily is gone forever. But Harper isn't letting me go that easy. She's been searching for answers. There's a way, she said one night, gripping my hand. To sever the pact, we go to the source. We find the place where you first begged to have her back. You have to unask the question. The place where it began, the accident site. We drive there under a blood moon, the sky screams with wind. The trees twist unnaturally. The world is off axis, but I step out. Alone, I kneel in the rain, just as I did that night, and I speak to the thing. I'm done, it doesn't scream, it laughs. And then I see her again, Lily, crying, reaching for me, but this time Harper's hand is on my shoulder. She's saying my name, I love you. Let her go, we'll grieve together, we'll heal. And I scream the only word that matters. No, not to Lily, to the Iltemate. And everything splits. The next thing I know, I'm in bed. Safe, Lily's photo on my nightstand, quiet. Still, Harper beside me, her hand in mine. The air is calm, but I know it isn't over. The Iltemate doesn't just vanish, it sleeps, waiting for the next lonely heart, the next whispered wish. But I've made my choice. I'll carry that curse. As long as it takes to keep what's left of my soul and Harper's love intact.